Hi, I'm Tom, and today Sherry and I went to the monthly meeting of the American Society of Civil Engineers Capital Branch. Sherry filmed a YouTube video, and I talked about my recent walk through Spain. Hope you liked the video, and if you do, be sure to subscribe, like, and share. Thank you.
Everybody give a big hand to Tom.
Thanks, Chris. You're welcome. Yeah, thanks everybody for coming here. Hopefully we'll get something out of this. The title of my talk is Observations from My Area, Thoughts from a Walk in Spain. Here's what I'll talk about. Obviously you gotta have an introduction. Then pedestrian facilities, complete streets and road diets in both urban and rural areas. I never really thought about road diets in rural areas, but there's a couple examples of it in here. Water infrastructure, kind of my favorite thing, both water distribution and surface water and storm water. And then I'll fill it out with just some neat stuff that I saw. It was, when we first got to Spain, I kept telling my friend, yeah, it feels like we're in a foreign land, and it was like, oh yeah, you are. So anyways, the introduction, kind of the setting of this was a 210-mile walk from Leon, Spain to Santiago de Compostela. It took us 17 days. We walked on the trail about 9 miles a day. A couple times we cheated and took taxis when we got behind schedule. What I discovered is cars are like time machines. You can go in like 30 minutes as far as you can walk in a day. And I spent a little bit of time thinking, man, it'd be nice if you could do this with projects, just throw 30 euros at it and get back on schedule. I haven't figured that part out. But I did it with a friend of mine, and Greg was, before he retired, he was a marine engineer on cargo ships. So we had a lot of similar interests and a lot of similar knowledge, but then kind of varied backgrounds too. So it kind of made for a lot of interesting conversations. We flew in and out of Barcelona, which has some, it's heavily urbanized and a lot of pedestrians, and so that was interesting. We stayed, and then we took a high-speed train to Leon, which was fun. They go almost 200 miles an hour. So we stayed in mostly in hostels. We carried our stuff in backpacks. And this, I mean, I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard of this, the Camino. There's a bunch of them, but it's nothing new. People have been doing this walk for centuries for a variety of reasons, and that's what we did. And I'm confident the routes changed over the years, but the principle remains the same. And it was just interesting to think about walking through here, how many people have walked this walk, since the 10th century. And it was just kind of neat, man, to kind of makes you feel insignificant in a lot of ways. And there's something different. There's something real different that I'd never noticed before about walking and experiencing a place at a walking pace. Normally, you drive by and like, oh, that was cool, and you're on to the next thing. And this, it was like, wow, I wonder what that is over there. And oh, I think it's this. And it was just a completely different experience. You had time to look at it, talk about it, and experience it. And that was fun. And we talked a lot about just basic engineering principles and the way things work. And there was stuff I learned in school that I hadn't thought about since school that we saw. And there was stuff I think about every day that was like, oh, that's kind of a different way to do that. And that's kind of neat. So, and there was some stuff that I just never seen before. So we'll start out with complete streets and road diets. Obviously, there was a lot of pedestrian facilities where we went. I mean, that was the setting of it. So in both urban and rural areas. And the pedestrian facilities, they ranged from, sidewalks in urban areas to pretty much just primitive trails in some areas covered with loose rocks, shale. There was one day it was raining and it was like walking in a stream bed all day. And that was interesting. So starting out in the urban areas, So complete streets, I'll give you a definition of complete streets. Complete streets is an approach to planning, designing, and building streets that enables safe access for all users, including pedestrians, bicyclists, motorists, and transit riders of all ages and abilities. And Spain has really embraced this. I mean, it's important to remember the setting that we were in. It was just mostly, you know, it was tourist areas and pedestrian areas, but it was almost like cars were secondary there. And it was kind of neat to see that. It was kind of interesting to see that. This is La Rambla. It's, which is like one of the big tourist areas in Barcelona. It started out as a sewage-filled stream. Well, it started out as a stream without sewage first, and then became sewage-filled. In 1440, they diverted the stream to run outside the city walls. And it's gradually started turning into a street, and that's what it's turned into today. And it's really kind of a center of Barcelona's urban life. And it was just bustling with activity and restaurants and stuff. And I mean, here's the room for the cars on either side. And then in the middle is space for pedestrians, and it was a neat place. And so the urban areas, I mean, this is some of the smaller roads, and it's like everybody uses that street. You know, cars would drive down here and you'd step out of the way. Cars would stop and wait for you, and the same thing in these alleys. It was closed when we were down in this area, so I don't know what was behind those doors. I'm not convinced you could pull a very big car in there. So this was an interesting roundabout. You know, I've done a couple projects with roundabouts, and this was interesting. I've never seen a roundabout where they invite people into the middle. You know, they've got actual crosswalks going into the middle, and there's transit stops in the quadrants. And I mean, my understanding of roundabouts is encouraging people to stop in the middle of a roundabout is not a good thing. But I think,
and you had to do it anyway.
yeah. I mean, culturally, I think there was a difference there. You know, where pedestrians get a lot more, I don't know what the word is, maybe respect, and cars stop for the pedestrians. Cars stop in the roundabouts for pedestrians. So, and there was a lot of roundabouts and traffic circles everywhere. And you'd walk up to the roundabout and cars would stop and you could cross the street. And the intersections are different here. It's hard to see in this picture, but there's pictures later that show it. In this area, and in a large portion of Barcelona, they cut the corners off the blocks. And so you pick up room for trash cans, and everything kind of pulls back. The sidewalks pull back, everything pulls back. And what it kind of did was it gave this space here. And so there could be people crossing the street, and then people on the road there, and cars could turn the corner and wait for pedestrians in the stacking area and not stop the through traffic. So it was kind of a neat idea. And this is from above. And these are one-way streets. Everything was one way on this intersection. But you can see how the crosswalks are pulled way back. You know, parking for bikes and motorcycles there. The bike lanes are two ways. And there's a lot of green and red painted bike lanes. But here you can see where they cut the corners off the blocks, and so there's room to park cars there. Some of them were just little plazas where people could hang out, restaurant tables like this one. And it was just neat looking at what cutting the corners off those blocks, what kind of space that created. And so this is that same intersection from the street level, and you can see the one-way streets, the bike lanes here, and then another one-way street here. A lot of the streets were just kind of chaos, you know, not a lot of them were real well-defined grids, but a lot of them was just chaos. I guess from back in the day, it was like a way to defend your city. It was just to have streets going everywhere, nobody could find their way around, and the attackers couldn't find where they were going. and it worked.
Tom, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
On the crosswalk so far back in the intersection, did you observe there being sight distance issues?
No.
No?
No. The big difficulty with it was, I wasn't used to that. You know, and in a lot of ways, figuring out how to cross the street was just a little puzzle you had to figure out right then. But you know, we were tourists, and I'm sure once you were there for a while, you get used to it. But it was different. But yeah, I didn't really notice sight distance issues. In fact, if anything, they were better because the crosswalks were pulled away from the intersection. And there was some room as you came around the corner to stop and wait for people.
Where the corners are cut off, was it obvious that that was public right of way or?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was, yeah, you know, this one's got cars parked there. And then this is just a plaza, you know, and there's curb here. So yeah, it was clear that it was public right of way. But if you look at it on Google Earth, it's kind of amazing because there's miles of this, almost identical blocks. So.
Hey, Tom. So with the intersections pulled back, or the crosswalks pulled back, how is ADA accomplished? Because it looked like there was a ramp on the picture you showed previously, but like if you wanted to go across the street, did you have to round the corner to go to the crosswalk and then come back, or?
No. Well, like here's a ramp. ADA, or I guess SDA, I don't know what you would call it, was, I think we've done a better job with that here than there. There was one guy in a wheelchair, and the guy was like, he was doing the same route, and he was in good shape, and it was amazing to watch him navigate it. But there were some things he just couldn't do. He could go up a curb in his wheelchair, but there's other things he struggled more with. But I think in the United States we do a better job with ADA. And so road diets, I mean, I think everybody kind of knows what a road diet is.
I don't.
So, I got a definition. A road diet or roadway configuration can improve safety, calm traffic, and provide better mobility and access for all road users and enhance overall quality of life. According to the FHWA, a road diet typically involves converting an existing 4-lane undivided road into a 3-lane road consisting of 2 through lanes and a center 2-way left turn lane. Or, you know, a good example of a local road diet is what we did on South Carson Street. We took a road that was 3 lanes in each direction with a center left turn lane, turned it into 2 lanes in each direction with a center left turn lane, and took those remaining 2 lanes, the space for those remaining 2 lanes, and moved them to the east side and put in a multi-use path and then a wide landscape buffer. And if you look at that, the old curb and gutter is still there along South Carson Street, like if you look in front of Rayleigh's. And so what they did in Spain was they created these things called super blocks. And I don't speak Spanish, so I won't pronounce this right. Superella in Catalan. And they take that road, they take the road diet idea up a notch. And I was gonna put a square up there because it really was. It was a whole nother level of road diets. And they take a big area and they route the through traffic around it. The traffic in the middle is very slow. 10 kilometers an hour is about 6 miles an hour. It's not even school zone speed, but you don't have very far to go. And then they just put people-centric features in where the cars used to be. And it's neat. You know, it wasn't fancy. I mean, the trees are in pots, and they just kind of built stuff on top of the AC, you know, parks for kids, and it's a really clever notion. And one thing that I noticed, something I've always paid attention to, like with traffic, and especially, you know, when you've got temporary traffic control for road construction, is I always listen for horns honking and tires squealing, people flipping each other off. You didn't hear that there. I mean, and to me, that says that this stuff works. You know, I mean, there's probably some cultural differences there, but it works. And there was no dent in cars. In the entire 3.5 weeks we were there, we saw 1 car accident, and it was a single truck accident. So, It's different than the way we do it. I think it worked.
Another quick question on that, Tom, the last one. How dense is the population in these areas?
Oh, it's very dense. I mean, these buildings are 4 or 5 story buildings.
Right.
And with, you know, people living in them and all kinds of uses. Yes, it's heavily urbanized.
And Tom, in those super blocks that you described,
Yeah.
was commerce at the lowest levels with living on the top floors? Could you actually like take groceries and shop, or did you have to commute long distances or further away to get your needs accommodated?
No, there was like grocery stores and, stuff pretty close, a couple blocks away. Every couple blocks there was a grocery store. A convenience store, style grocery store, I had to go to a hardware store at one time, and I had to walk about a mile to get to a hardware store. So you didn't have to walk far for stuff. And then here's rural road diets, and this was kind of one of the aha moments. Is this trail, this Camino, has just kind of experienced explosive growth over the last 10 or 15 years. And Spain has really worked hard to kind of make it work better. And a lot of times you are walking on sometimes you're walking on highway shoulders, which was uncomfortable. And there's some more on that later. But here, they just kind of put these blocks along there and restripe the lanes narrower, and there's a place for pedestrians to walk. That's not gonna keep a car from coming across and hitting you, but it's gonna discourage people from taking the turnway. They'll probably only do that once. And here, they just cast barrier rail, restripe the road, and you can still see the old fog line. So, and that worked, and obviously you felt real comfortable walking along there next to a highway. This was kind of a funny day. Some places, this is a bridge, and some places you were walking along the side of the highway, and cars would come and you'd step over the barrier rail. And we were walking up this bridge, and this cow comes running over the top of the bridge and slipping on the asphalt. Cows don't get very good traction on asphalt. And so we hopped over the barrier rail to create some space, hopefully keep the cow from getting too scared. The cow was scared. And so we hopped over the barrier rail, and the cow skittered on past. And, but it was just one of those weird random moments. It was kind of fun. And here's some stuff about ADA. This was a typical curb ramp, and a lot of areas didn't have them. And I've seen pictures like this, and I thought they were like, oh, there's probably one in the world, and people were poking fun at it. They were all over. And, I don't think you could push somebody up that in a wheelchair. So, but, and this was something else I noticed, and we'll get more into it later, but a lot of the curbs were these granite blocks, which was neat. And then a lot of tile veneer on the concrete.
Yeah, I think that's just a function of ready supply. You see that in New England too, that there's the street curbs are cut out of granite.
Yep. And a lot of precast concrete too that was brought in. We saw entire buildings with like precast trusses and precast columns. And so here's some more sidewalks. Here, this is the only elevator I saw for pedestrians, at least they could get down there. So somebody in a wheelchair or a family pushing a carriage, a baby carriage or something, they could actually go down there. This was an interesting intersection. It was flat. There was no curbs, and there was stoplights. Well, you can see one up there for traffic. And then this line would turn green when the pedestrians would cross. And it worked, and you knew what to do, but there was just something missing when you didn't have this little 6-inch curb. A little 6-inch curb's not gonna stop a car, but it made you feel more comfortable. Or maybe I should say, not having a 6-inch curb was a little unnerving. And here's more material. This is just about the different sidewalk materials. Almost universally, there was some kind of tile veneer on the sidewalks. And one benefit I noticed from that is you could see where they had gone in to put in utilities or something. And they repoured the concrete and then just reset the tiles on top. So you didn't have to worry about cutting back to a hole joint, you could cut where you want. And so that was kind of interesting. And then the paths out in the rural areas, I mean, they ranged from, 8-foot wide asphalt paths to, well, like I said earlier, felt like you were walking in a stream bed. This one was interesting, and it's hard, I tried to find a picture that showed it better, but this was, they just put shotcrete down on the path, and you walked on the shotcrete, and it was all breaking up, and that wasn't working real well. So, but here, again, here's more granite blocks in that little drainage ditch. They're kind of everywhere. And this was neat, so this was a high-speed rail track, and so obviously you can't just have people walking across the railroad tracks. And this whole structure was built so people could weave back and forth, get up, walk over the railroad track, and come back down the other side. But the high-speed train tracks, they were all fenced to keep animals and everything out. So now I've talked about water, this is kind of my favorite thing. There's a ton of neat old bridges everywhere you looked, and this was one of them. But the thing that caught my eye here is, like, you look at this length of this bridge, there's 20 arches, and there's 3 of them that had water flowing under it. And if you look close, you can see how some of the bridge has been rebuilt. So I think this is the older portion. And looking on top, you can see that a lot of work had been done. But I'm thinking, I'm like, why did they do that? And what it was that was a much larger river, and they diverted the river for agriculture, and so now the river was pretty narrow. But they left the bridge there, and this was a big area that they used for medieval festivals. And it's just big, open, grassy area, because really functionally the bank ends right in here. You can see that fence. And looking at it in plan view, it's, they're obviously pretty sure that there's not gonna be a whole lot, the old river flow coming down there, because they built buildings in there, and ironically a swimming pool. It's open channel flow. Greg and I, let me back up, like, no presentation at an ASCE event should be missing a graph and an equation. So I put graphs and equations in here, because they're cool. So my friend Greg and I, we stopped and we looked at this for a while. He had never thought a whole lot about open channel flow. And, but this is a good example. You start over here with uniform flow, and as you work your way upstream, it converts to gradually varied flow in here, rapidly varying flow back. As you come over the lip of the dam, it's back to gradually varied flow, and then uniform flow. And I think we all know about that. But we had a good conversation about specific energy, subcritical flow, supercritical flow, and critical flow. And this is why that is. You pick any cross section on this river, and the volumetric flow rate for that entire cross section is going to be the same. And this is a chart of specific energy down here and depth up here. And for any specific energy, there's 2 solutions. The upper one the deeper one is subcritical flow. The lower solution is critical flow. And he had never thought about that before. I don't know. I grew up by the stream in Kings Canyon. I played with the water a lot. So, and the Freud number is kind of the determining factor here. If the Freud number, if the Freud number is less than 1, it's subcritical flow. And so it's slow moving water with backwater effects. Surface waves travel faster than the flow is going. Freud number is greater than 1, it's supercritical flow, like in this area. And it's relatively fast moving, shallow water. with no backwater effects. And the flow in supercritical flow moves faster than the waves travel on the surface of the water. And then at the base of the dam in here somewhere is critical flow. That's where the specific energy is at a minimum. And that's where these hydraulic jumps occur. And hydraulic jumps are just something else that's kind of fascinating. And then, you know, you go farther down the stream, you're back to some critical flow and off you go. And so this is a tool you can use to just like determine if flow is supercritical or subcritical. You stick it in the water, and if waves pile up behind it, it's subcritical flow. If they don't, and the angle of the waves downstream of it is less than 45 degrees, that's supercritical flow. And at critical flow, that angle's 45 degrees. And my friend Greg, he made the comparison to ships. He spent a lot of time on ships, and it's when the wave quits being in front of the bow of the ship, that's when you hit that celerity, the speed of the wave in water. So, now pressurized pipe flow. So, I mean, obviously this is a walking trail, and all along the way there was places to get water, like, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 kilometers, really. You could stop and get water, and they were just kind of beautiful spots. You know, and some of them were not that good, obviously. I put the best pictures in there. But you know, there's always a valve, mostly always a valve on them. And so you can turn the water on and off. But some of them just flowed continuously, you know, and I think they were fed by streams, springs, and probably some artesian wells. Like this one, this was in a real flat area for, I don't know, 5 or 6 miles around. It was just flat. And so I think that was probably came from an artesian well. And as a kid, artesian wells fascinated me. My dad had a lot in Douglas County, and there was this artesian well, and I was like, man, that's like magic. How does that work? You know, and but later I learned how it works. You've got, you know, a confined aquifer with confining layers here and here, and then so the rest over here doesn't really matter as far as the artesian wells go. And but you get rainfall. If you've got enough slope here, then that confined aquifer fills with water. Here's the hydraulic grade line. And if there's an opening above the hydraulic grade line, water's gonna come out. It's gonna take a genius to figure that out. And but then we were here, and we stopped and looked. The water tanks there were pretty, there was 2 different styles of water tanks, and that's a water tank. And I thought it was pretty cool looking. But we stopped there and we were looking at that, and it occurred to me that hydraulically, there's no real difference between water in a pipe going to a spigot than an artesian well. The parts are different, but that's about it. So, so here's the Bernoulli equation for water. It's the same principle, you know, energy is conserved, that's the principle. And anywhere in the system, you know, you got your pressure head plus your elevation head plus your velocity head. It's gonna equal that in another location, except what you lose for pipe friction. And, but you know, these confining layers can either be the walls of a pipe or geologic confining layers. You know, this area up high, that can either be a water tank or just water piling up in an aquifer. And so it was kind of like an aha moment when I realized there's no real difference. I mean, the parts are different, but you know, the friction of the water going through the confined aquifer, that's your C value when it comes to pipe and your pipe size. So it was kind of neat to realize that. This struck me. You know, I did water operations for a number of years, and around here we put a lot of effort into keeping water meters from freezing, and we put some effort into thawing them out when they do. And this was, so the area we were in was a little bit north of where we are, so just based on that you'd think it would be colder. It was 1,000 feet lower than where we are, so you'd think, maybe a little bit warmer. But I mean, clearly they're confident they're not gonna get freezing temperatures. These are water meters, and this is a water supply to the building, so they're pretty confident nothing's gonna freeze. And the only thing I could think of is just the proximity to the ocean, and there is what keeps their weather warm enough there, so. But that was interesting. And then we just saw like a lot of neat stuff walking through there, and like I said, you know, going at a walking pace is kind of different. This was outside an energy museum. It was an old power plant that had been abandoned, and they just made an energy museum there. It was closed when we went there. We went past there, which was too bad, but it had all this stuff outside. My friend Greg called it an energy petting zoo, which I thought was a neat term. But this is a set of turbines from a steam turbine. These are circuit breakers for, you know, big power. Obviously there's 3 of them, so 3-phase power. And then this is an insulator. In this area, there was just this stuff all over the place, and it was neat. And another thing I noticed was some kind of unique uses of different materials. There was a lot of stone quarries around there, and this was an example. This was right along a highway where they cut through to put in a highway, and the blocks were huge. You know, a lot of times you'll see these big rock faces with a lot of cracks in them. And these weren't very cracked up, which was interesting. And but so they had a lot of stone slabs. And they just cut slabs up and made a picnic table out of it in that middle picture. And this was just a slab they used on top of the DI, for the cover on the DI, which I thought was pretty interesting. And then arches, you know, we all, in engineering school, we all learned about arches. But this was neat to look at kind of how arches had evolved over time. You know, initially they started out, they built their walls up and then stuck thin pieces of rock in there in like a wedge. That as the weight up here came down, it's gonna tighten up that wedge. And I thought that was really something, but then I noticed across the street, they have basically the same thing, except there's a piece of steel under here to hold those rocks up. There was no steel there. And then as the arches kind of evolved, you can see, you know, thin pieces of rock that it arches over. And at the end, you know, you got your keystone and kind of your typical arch that you see today. So it was, I mean, because some of these buildings are 10th century buildings, and it was just neat to look at the changes over time. And this bridge was cool. The little sign by this bridge said that it was built during the Middle Ages. And we stood there and looked at it for a while and just imagined carts and chariots and stuff going over there. But then I noticed these iron column staples in there. And I'm pretty well certain that those staples have been replaced. I mean, I don't think the staples have been there since the Middle Ages. So, and trees, I always like looking at trees. And, but we saw a lot of these pistol-butted trees. There are signs of unstable slopes. This one was interesting because, I mean, obviously these walls were real stable, but, you know, you've got this tree it's a pistol-butted tree, probably because the soil on top is slipping down and kind of tipping the tree, and then the tree grows up. So a tree on the bottom, I think something happened to that tree, and it was able to recover and continue to grow. Something knocked it over however long ago. So this guy was cool. He loved his tractor, and we stopped and we were trying to. I don't speak. Well, I know a little bit of Spanish now. I know 3.5 weeks worth of Spanish. My friend knew a little more, but we were trying to talk to this guy about his tractor, and we asked him when it was made, and he said some number in Spanish. It was like, I don't know what that means, you know, but he pointed to a number cast in the block of his tractor. It was 1960 something. And the cool thing that I realized there, And I'd never thought about it before, but written numbers are pretty universal. You know, I'm sure there's some languages that use a different numbering system, but written numbers are pretty universal. I worked with a Russian woman for a while, and we discovered that. And equations are pretty universal. And that's the way we communicate. She didn't speak real good English when she started, but we could communicate in equations, and that was neat. And shopkeepers kept calculators on their counter, and that's how they told you the number of what you rang up. That's because they could tell me the number in Spanish, it wouldn't mean anything to them. But they'd punch it into their calculator and hold up their calculator. And Spanish calculators look just like American ones, which was one of those, wow, that's kind of cool. So the scenery was beautiful, man. We were walking along and we literally were like, dude, this is like the Windows 95 picture. we were, I was like, I wonder if this is where they took the Windows 95 picture. And turns out that was taken down by San Jose. We looked it up, but it is, man, a recliner when you've been walking all day. A comfortable recliner is a pretty sweet thing to find. And I like the duct tape on it too. So, and then this was interesting. There was a lot of buildings in just serious states of disrepair, you know, just falling in. And there was a lot of buildings that had been rehabilitated. And literally, like that one, just abutting each other. And you could tell in some places that was a problem. There's braces where the one building completely collapsed, and there's braces holding up the buildings on either side. But then there was buildings that had been refurbished. I think probably at one point, this building looked an awful lot like that. And this is like a 20-year-old guy that opened up a hostel and refurbished the building. And you can see here, you know, where they rebuilt the top, probably with bricks and stucco over the top. And then here it is on the inside, and you can see it drop down there. I don't know if you can see it from back there, but the beams on the roof I think they might have cut them wrong and used them anyways. Because instead of coming together like this, they come together like that and they alternate them, going back. But it was just a neat building. You know, who knows how old that building was? And this guy just renovated it. And these things, we kept walking past these and we're like, what are those? What are those? And they looked a lot like the cemeteries. I think the groundwater is real high. In the cemeteries, everybody's kind of above ground in crypts and stuff. But we finally figured out what those were. They're called herreros, and that's where they would store grain. And there's slats on the side to let ventilation in there, and so the grain could dry out. And then these they're elevated so the rodents can't get up there and eat the grain. So it's kind of cool. And there was just some other places that were just beautiful. This is the Knights Templar Castle in Pompadour, I think. Ponferrada. And it was hard to take pictures of it because it was huge. And these are the best pictures I could get of it. It was built at the end of the 15th and the beginning of the 16th century. And people, Knights Templar, they're the ones that built it. And people would want to live near that because it was safer. Because the Knights Templar would protect you. And these are interesting. I thought these were interesting. I guess even on castles you need emergency exits. Probably the building department needed to do that. And then there's got this balcony up here that's added on later. And if you're a Monty Python fan, you might recognize that. So, and this place was neat. This is the oldest inhabited monastery in Spain. It's called the Samos Monastery, and it was built in the 6th century, but it's just this beautiful building, like immaculately maintained. We toured it, and the whole place was just gorgeous. I mean, obviously, you know, they've done a lot of work on it since the 6th century, but it was neat. There's a big park area out in front. And these are just a couple of neat pictures that I saw. This was along the river too, obviously. You can see the bridge there. And there's a restaurant back here. And these trees, there's a bunch of those trees. I don't think I've ever seen trees like that before, but they were just neat. And then this was the end of the day. We came over the top of this ridge, and it rained all day that day. The trail was steep, and it was the day we walked in the stream bed all day. And so it's nice to come over the hill and see this village. And if you look way off in the distance, you can see some flagpoles. That was the hostel we stayed at that night. And after walking all day, it's just neat to see how it ends in sight. You know, something else that I noticed on that trip, and it might be a good metaphor for life, is if we walked, 5 miles that day, well, we never walked that short of a distance, but some days we walked 15 miles. No matter how far we walked that day, the last few kilometers were just grueling, and my feet hurt. And why is it always the last 3 kilometers? If I didn't know how many more kilometers, it probably wouldn't be hard. But I couldn't quite wrap my head around that, why it was the last bit that was always the hardest. There's a lot of public art. I mean, obviously, it's Spain, there's tons of churches. Just everywhere there's beautiful stone carvings and statues. And some of it's a little, I don't know that I would call it lower end, but maybe common man's art. So, but somebody just built that spot there for something, who knows why. And somebody put their broken sunglasses on the statue. And it was just neat. It was just neat to walk along and come across this stuff. And this was Hermitage. And I don't know why, but I looked at that for a while, and it was a beautiful building, and it was interesting. I mean, as old as that building was, I don't know how old it was, in the middle of this town, and it just had a real cool energy and a neat vibe, and the lighting on it was just beautiful. And I don't know if anybody lived in that Hermitage, but if they did, they kept to themselves. So, that was a joke. Hermits? And so here's my final thought. As a professional, it's easy for me to get caught up in the day-to-day life and forget to look at the bigger picture. I think sometimes it's important to step outside my comfort zone and just kind of disrupt my life. Get away from my role as an engineer and look at the world from a different perspective. As a person occupying a point in space and time on an undefined path, and see what I discover. And this picture kind of says it all for me. The road signs have directions to all sorts of different places, and including turning around and going back, all these named places. And it was funny. We walked up to this and I'm like, man, I wonder which way we should go. I literally reached in my pocket and pulled out my phone to look at the map. And my friend Greg's like, there's an arrow, let's go that way. And I was like, oh yeah. And the monument sign points out a direction. That's all I really need to go is, what direction do I take my next step in? That's all I really need to know. And I remember from school, we had to do numerical analysis. And the Runkutta, I don't know if you guys ever did the Runkutta method. And it's used to solve systems of nonlinear equations like open channel flow over the top of the dam to calculate the profile. And there's no way you can calculate the end. What you have to do is, you know where you start, you do this algorithm one time, and it tells you which direction you head for the next step. And you just keep going through that, and pretty soon you get to the end. And that's what this is. I don't need to know how to get all the way there. I just need to follow the sign. So, and hopefully, remembering things like that made me a better engineer. Because, it's easy when we start a big project and, we start thinking about all the things we have to do. And I don't know about anybody else, but I tend to get overwhelmed. I don't need to worry about all that stuff. All I need to do is just, with the title of the project on my drafting template. And it's enough to get going. And so hopefully that idea makes me a better professional and a better pilgrim. And you know, when we started this thing, my friend kept calling it pilgrims, and I was really uncomfortable with that word. Then I looked up pilgrim in a dictionary. One of the definitions is somebody who's journeying through life. It's me. So that's it. That's all I got. Anybody got any questions?
I have a comment.
Okay.
Me,
Oh.
your wife.
That's not good. I recognize that voice.
I was just a comment, acknowledge, Tom has a gift of seeing the beautiful things in the surroundings that he's in. But we created a Facebook group for the family to follow him along while he was walking. And I would get the pictures every day on the download. But the engineer was there the whole entire time because I would get these photographs of a vent in the ground, a pipe this way, and I'm like, am I supposed to share that with the family, or is that? So, great job.
Randy.
Tom, non-technically, what was your best part of your trip and your most challenging part of your trip?
I don't know. I mean, that's what everybody asks, and I don't know. What I tried really hard to do was not have any expectations. And maybe the best part and the most challenging part was that one day we're walking, it rained all day. The trail was, I mean, literally, you had to look where you were gonna put your foot every single time and look where you're gonna put your walking sticks every single time. And it was like uphill steep, downhill steep, raining the whole time. And we got to the end and somebody said, was that a really hard day? And I honestly, I didn't know. It just was what it was. And maybe that realization was the best part, and maybe that difficult day walking was the worst part. I didn't put the picture of it in there, but it was some of the most incredible views. You look across this valley and there's a castle, you know, across a valley. And it was just amazing. But there was there was a good lesson. There was a German guy. We got to the hostel that night, and there's this German guy with a scowl on his face staring out the window. We're like, how's it going? He's like, horrible. You can't get dinner. And look, this is my dinner. And he had a pile of pastries from a vending machine. And we're like, because the hostel was full, it was raining. And they had dinner at different times. And the first couple were full and you had to wait till 8:30. Not a big deal. We decided just to walk into the town and find something else. We're like, we're gonna go into town, you wanna get some dinner? He's like, no, I don't. This is all I get. And what I got from that, it's just your attitude, man. In his perspective, that was it. His pile of vending machine pastries was his dinner. And we walked and found some dinner. And I think that was probably one of the best days. That's a long way of saying that. Yeah.
At those water filling stations, did you have to filter or treat the water at all, or could you just drink it straight?
You could just drink it straight. There's a few of them. There's a sign on there in Spanish, but you could figure out what it meant. It said like agua sin, and we're like, yeah, I don't drink that. But yeah, dude, mostly you could just drink from them.
How did it taste?
Good. It was good. I mean, it was rural and it was mountainous and probably well water. I never saw a water treatment plant anywhere. I saw one, we think it was a sewage treatment plant, but it was just built underground. It was like a packaged sewer treatment plant. So, anybody else? Well, thanks for listening.
All right.
Well, thanks for watching, and I hope you liked my joke about the hermit staying in the hermitage. And if you liked the video, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Have a good day.